Please marry my mom, human. She's all I have left," begged the alien child. Dane had seen many strange things in her years as a human diplomat in the far reaches of the galaxy. But nothing had prepared her for the small, a trembling figure that appeared in the grand reception hall of the Varelian embassy. She was attending what was supposed to be a routine cultural exchange, humans and Varelians sharing knowledge, art and stories to build trust. She had expected long speeches, careful negotiations, and polite handshakes. Instead, a small, wide-eyed alien child was staring at her with a mixture of fear and hope that made her pause. The child's skin shimmered, faintly under the soft embassy lights, a pale green that seemed almost liquid as it caught the glow. His large, golden eyes held something intense, something humanly familiar. Desperation. He stepped forward, clutching at a small pendant around his neck, and his voice came out in broken but clear English. "Please, marry my mom, human. She's all I have left." Ilara froze. Her mind raced. Humans had been interacting with the Varelians for decades, but she had never encountered anything like this. Diplomats were trained to remain calm, to analyze, to respond with reason and logic. Yet here was a child, simple in appearance, whose words bypassed all protocol and struck directly at her heart. "Wait, what?" Ilara asked, her voice steady, only on the surface. "My mom," the child said again, his small voice trembling. She is in danger. They want to take her away. I have no one else." The room, filled with officials and dignitaries from both species, had gone quiet. A few humans shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene. The Varelians were watching with interest, their faces unreadable, but their eyes sharp. Ilara could feel the weight of their gaze. Any misstep here could lead to a diplomatic incident. She crouched slightly to meet the child's eyes. "Who is taking your mother? What is happening?" "My father's rivals," the child said, his words coming faster now. "They want her gone. If she dies, I die too. Please help us." "Help her, help me." Ilara's heart clenched. There was an honesty in his words, a raw fear that no diplomat's speech could disguise. The child's plea was simple, yet profound. It carried a gravity that transcended species, laws, and protocol. "Come with me," she said softly. "I'll find her." The child nodded, relief flooding his small frame. "Thank you. Thank you, human." They moved quickly through the embassy corridors, past towering Varelian guards who stepped aside, sensing the sincerity in Ilara's tone. She barely knew where she was going. Instinct guided her. Driven by a mix of concern for the child and curiosity about the mother who had inspired such desperation. When they reached a private chamber, a woman stood waiting, her posture regal yet tense. She had the same pale green skin as her son, and her eyes a deep liquid gold, flicked toward Ilara with cautious interest. Her dark hair flowed like ink around her shoulders, and she exuded an aura of strength wrapped in worry. "Ilara Dane," the woman said, her voice calm but wary. "I am Lyra, and you are—" "This is Kale," Ilara interrupted, kneeling next to the boy. "He told me about the danger. About you. I want to help." Lyra's gaze softened slightly as she looked at her child. "Kale, you told them," she whispered, more to herself than to Ilara. Kale nodded quickly. "I had to. I didn't know what else to do. Please, Mom." They listened to humans. They might save us. Lyra turned her eyes to Ilara fully now, her caution giving way to something else. Hope. "Humans do not usually involve themselves in our politics," she said slowly. "You must understand. If you interfere, it could have consequences. Severe ones." Ilara nodded. "I understand that. But a child's life, your life, is more important than politics." Lyra studied her for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "Then you must be very brave, human. Our enemies are not ordinary. They have power and cunning far beyond what your species usually encounters. Yet, if you are willing, I will explain everything." Kale leaned against his mother, relief and fear mingling on his small face. "Mom, they can help us, right?" Lyra placed a hand on her son's shoulder, a gesture full of both comfort and solemnity. "We hope," she said softly. Ilara listened carefully as Lyra explained the situation. Their family, one of the last of the Varelian noble line, had been threatened by a rival faction for decades. The faction sought to eliminate them to gain control of the planet and its resources. Lyra had managed to survive through diplomacy and secrecy, but recent events had escalated. Assassinations, sabotage, and threats were now aimed directly at her and Kale. "They believe that without me, Kale will be vulnerable," Lyra said. Her voice held no hint of fear, only a matter-of-fact gravity. "He is all I have left, and now it seems you may be our only chance." Ilara felt a rush of determination. This was more than diplomacy. It was life and death, and humans had a reputation for unpredictability, sometimes reckless, sometimes ingenious. Perhaps that unpredictability could work in their favor. "I will help," she said firmly. "But we need to be smart. We need a plan." Lyra nodded, relief briefly softening her stern expression. "We do not have much time. They have spies everywhere. We must move carefully." As they spoke, Kale sat quietly, absorbing every word. His faith in Ilara had not wavered since their first meeting. He had put all his hope in a human, and that trust gave her both courage and a sense of responsibility she had never known before. Ilara's mind raced as she considered their options. She could alert the human embassy, but that risked exposing them to even greater danger. She could attempt stealthy intervention, but she had limited knowledge of Varelian politics and security systems. And she could, as Lyra subtly suggested, act as a shield herself, using her presence as a human diplomat to deter the faction from striking openly. "The first thing," Lyra said finally, "is to understand our enemy. Who are they exactly? What do they want?" Lyra leaned back, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she began to outline the rival faction's history. They were cunning, resourceful, and ruthless. Their leaders had manipulated Varelian law, twisted alliances, and even resorted to covert attacks on other noble houses to consolidate power. "They underestimate humans," Lyra said. "They believe your species is weak, emotional, not capable of real strategy or courage. That is why your presence could change everything." Ilara allowed herself a small, confident smile. Humans might be underestimated, but they were resilient, resourceful, capable of surprising even the most powerful adversaries. She had faced impossible odds before and had learned that intelligence, creativity, and determination could turn the tide in ways others could not imagine. "We will use that," she said. "We'll turn their underestimation into their weakness." Kale's eyes shone with hope, and he reached out to grasp her hand. "Do you promise?" he asked, his voice small but earnest. Ilara knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. "I promise we'll try our best. I won't let anything happen to you or your mother." Lyra studied Ilara for a long moment. There was an unspoken understanding forming between them, a bond forged by necessity, trust, and the shared goal of survival. Lyra's eyes softened, the weight of fear momentarily lifting. "You are brave," she said quietly. "Perhaps this will work because of you. Humans can surprise us, yes?" Ilara nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. "We can surprise anyone, and we will." For Kale, the child smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. It was the first time she had seen that glimmer of hope on his face since their meeting began. Outside the chamber, the Varelian city pulsed with life, unaware of the delicate drama unfolding behind closed doors. Ilara knew that time was short. The enemy would not wait. Plans would need to be formed, alliances tested, and courage proven. And at the center of it all was Kale, the small child whose plea had brought them together. In that moment, Ilara Dane understood something fundamental about humans. Sometimes, the right choice was not the one dictated by rules, politics, or fear. Sometimes, it was the choice made from the heart. And for Kale, she would make that choice, even if it meant stepping into danger she could not fully see. The room grew silent again, as Lyra and Alara exchanged a determined glance. The next steps would be dangerous, uncertain, and unprecedented, but together. Human ingenuity and Varelian resilience might just be enough to face whatever came next. And somewhere deep inside, Cal allowed himself to hope. Perhaps, for the first time in his young life, he was not alone. Alara spent the night reviewing everything Lyra had told her. The Varelian noble line was fragile, the enemy faction cunning. And Cale's life long with his mother's hung in the balance. She knew that any mistake could cost them everything. Yet, she also knew humans had an advantage the Varelians did not fully understand: adaptability. By morning, Alara had a plan. It would not be easy, but she trusted her instincts. The first step was understanding the enemy. Lyra agreed to take her to the Council Archives, a place deep within the city where records of every faction, alliance, and secret agreement were kept. It was heavily guarded, and few outsiders had ever been allowed inside. As they walked through the marble corridors, Cale clinging to his mother's hand, Alara noticed the subtle ways the Varelians moved their telepathic communication, their precise gestures, and the quiet tension in every corner. Humans were different, more unpredictable, but that might be exactly what they needed. Inside the archives, rows of glowing panels and holographic displays stretched as far as Alara could see. Lyra gestured toward a seat and began pulling up files. These contain every detail of our enemy's plans, past attacks, alliances, and weaknesses. But you must understand, human, that some of this knowledge is dangerous. Even a small misstep could be catastrophic. Lara nodded. I understand. But the first step to protecting you both is knowing exactly who we're dealing with. As Lyra explained, Elara's mind raced. The rival faction was ruthless. They had eliminated entire noble families before, and their reach extended far beyond Varelian society. They had spies embedded in nearly every city, and their influence in the council was growing. This was not just politics, it was survival. Cale sat quietly beside them, listening. Every so often he would fidget with his pendant, his small hands betraying his nervous energy. "Mom, will they really try to hurt us?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra placed her hand over his. "Yes, Cale, they will try. But that is why we are preparing. You must trust Alara, and I must trust her as well. She is human, yes, but humans can do things others cannot predict." Alara smiled gently. "Cale, humans have a strange way of solving problems. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we succeed brilliantly. But I promise I will do everything I can to keep you safe." Cale's eyes widened, hope flickering in their depths. He nodded slowly, as if understanding that safety might not come from magic or alien power alone, but from clever thinking and courage. For the next several hours, Alara studied the enemy's weaknesses, their patterns, and their movements. She asked questions, challenged assumptions, and suggested tactics the Varelians might not have considered. Lyra watched her carefully, impressed by the human's insight and determination. "You think like a strategist," Lyra said quietly. "Your perspective is different. Dangerous, perhaps, but dangerous in a useful way." Lyra nodded. "Dangerous, yes. Useful, hopefully." They moved next to the city's observation deck to examine the rival factions' patrol routes and known bases. From above, the city looked peaceful, a shimmering jewel of light and life. But Alara knew what lay beneath: spies, hidden weapons, and silent threats. She realized that the battle they faced would not just be physical but also mental. Outthinking the enemy would be as important as confronting them directly. Cale stayed close to her side, his small hand brushing against hers. "Do you think humans are strong?" he asked. Alara smiled. "We are, in ways you might not expect. Sometimes strength is not in size or power. It is in cleverness, in courage, and in protecting the people you love." Cale considered this. "Then maybe we have a chance," he whispered. Lyra glanced at him, her expression softening. "Yes, Cale. With humans like her, perhaps we do." As they worked, Alara noticed subtle movements outside the observation window's shadows, flitting across rooftops, shapes that seemed to disappear when looked at directly. The rival faction was already here, closer than they had imagined. Time was short. Ilara turned to Lyra. We need to act quickly. First, we must create a safe place for you and Kale, somewhere they cannot reach. Then, we need a way to mislead them, to protect your home and your people while we prepare for what comes next. Lyra nodded. Agreed. There is a hidden sanctuary beneath the city, one known only to a few of our loyalists. We can take Kale there. Kale's eyes lit up. Really? It's safe? Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. Yes, my son. Safe. For now. But you must be brave. Humans will help us, but you must help too. Ilara crouched to his level. Kale, you are already helping just by being brave and smart. But we will need you to trust us completely. Can you do that? He nodded solemnly, as if he understood the weight of what was asked. I will. That evening, they made their way through the quiet streets to the hidden sanctuary. The passageways were narrow and twisting, a maze designed to confuse intruders. Lyra moved with ease. Ilara followed, and Kale's small hands touched the walls, guiding them safely. When they arrived, the sanctuary revealed itself as a warm, secure space filled with supplies, communications, equipment, and defensive systems. Ilara marveled at the Varelians' foresight. They had prepared for situations like this for generations. This is incredible. With this, we can plan, observe, and stay safe while we figure out the next move. Lyra nodded. Yes, but staying safe is only part of it. We must also consider offense, or at least deterrence. They respect power, even if they underestimate courage. Your human perspective may give us the edge we need. Ilara studied the systems and noted how they could use them to mislead the enemy. Decoys, false signals, and strategic misinformation could buy them time and protect Lyra's home. We can make them think we are weaker than we are, she said. Then, when they act, we can strike in ways they do not expect. Kale watched her carefully, as if understanding more than his years allowed. You really think humans can trick them? Ilara smiled at him. Yes, and not just trick them out. Smart them. That is how we survive. Lyra placed a hand on Ilara's arm. I trust you. But understand this. If we fail, it will not just be my life at risk. Kale's life, the lives of those who serve us, and the future of our line are all in danger. Are you ready for that? Ilara met her gaze steadily. I am. I do not know exactly how it will turn out, but I will do everything I can. That is a human promise. The child, Kale, tugged gently at her sleeve. Thank you, he whispered. I feel like maybe we can really win. Ilara knelt and looked at him, placing her hands on his small shoulders. We will do our best. And with you helping, I believe we can. That night, as they rested in the sanctuary, Ilara could not sleep. She reviewed the enemy's patterns, the city maps, and Lyra's notes. Every detail mattered. Humans had survived and thrived because of planning, cleverness, and courage, the same traits that would keep them alive here. She realized that their fight would test not only their strength, but also their trust. Lyra had to trust a human, Kale had to trust them both, and Ilara had to trust herself. Outside, the city shimmered in quiet light, unaware of the storm approaching. Shadows moved, spies observed, and distant whispers spoke of plans that might soon come crashing down. Ilara knew that the next day could bring the first real confrontation with the enemy. She also knew that humans had one advantage that no alien faction could fully predict: the willingness to fight for what they loved, even against impossible odds. As she watched Kale sleeping beside his mother, she made a silent vow. No matter what came next, she would protect them, and she would use every ounce of human ingenuity, courage to do it. For the first time since she arrived on this distant world, Ilara felt a sense of clarity. The stakes were high, the danger real, but they were not helpless. Together, human, Varelian, and child, they had a chance. And in the galaxy, hope, no matter how small, could be the most powerful weapon of all. Outside, the city remained quiet, but Ilara knew the silence was only temporary. Soon, the enemy would move, and then everything would be tested. She tightened her grip on the controls of the sanctuary systems, ready for whatever came next. And Kale, the small alien child who had asked for a human to marry his mother, would watch and learn that bravery could come in many forms, even from a species he had never fully understood before. The sun had not yet risen over the Varelian city when Alara Dane began her preparations. The enemy was closer than anyone had imagined, and she knew that waiting passively would be dangerous. Humans had survived in countless impossible situations, and this was no different. She had a small advantage in predictability, and she planned to use it fully. Lyra and Kale were awake early as well. The child clung to his mother's hand, bright eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. "Mom, will they come today?" he asked. Lyra kissed the top of his head. "Perhaps, Kale, but today we are ready." Alara had spent the night examining patrol routes, hidden entrances, and the patterns of the rival factions' movements. Humans could see connections that others might overlook, small gaps and timing errors that could be exploited. "Kale," she said softly, crouching to his level, "you are going to help me. There are secret paths through the city only you know. Can you guide me?" Kale nodded solemnly. "I can do that. I will keep you safe." Alara smiled. "Good, because we are going to need every advantage we can get." By mid-morning, the sanctuary buzzed with quiet activity. Lyra had alerted her loyalists, hidden Varelian guards, and civilians who could help without drawing attention. Alara coordinated with them, explaining her plan step by step. The humans would not fight with raw strength. They would outthink the enemy, use misdirection, and create the illusion of weakness, while preparing traps the rival faction would never expect. The first move involved creating decoys. Holographic projections of Lyra and Kale were set up in multiple locations throughout the city, making it appear as though they were traveling openly. Small disturbances and false messages were sent to mislead the faction, who were watching closely. "They will believe Lyra is here," Alara said, her voice firm. "She will be safe in the sanctuary. If they strike, they will waste time chasing shadows while we control the battlefield." Lyra watched her with admiration. "You are clever, human. Very clever. Varelians rarely use deception so boldly, but it is working." Kale peeked over a console. "Do you think they will fall for it?" Alara grinned. "They have no choice but to try. They will underestimate us because we are humans. And that is how we win." As they finished preparations, distant shadows flickered across the city streets. Scouts from the rival faction had arrived, moving silently, unaware that their every step was being monitored. Alara watched the displays intently, noting patterns and timing. Humans excelled at seeing what others missed. A small gap in patrol coverage here, misaligned schedule there. These were opportunities waiting to be seized. "Now we wait," Alara said, though she knew waiting was not passive. Every minute counted. The first attack came just before noon. A small group of the rival faction's forces attempted to breach the city's defenses near one of the decoy locations. Holograms flickered, smoke generators activated, and false alarms blared. The attackers hesitated, confused by the unexpected chaos. Ilara's heart pounded as she coordinated the response. "Deploy the defensive drones near the north gate," she instructed. "Use the secondary corridors to flank them. Keep them distracted while Lyra stays hidden." Lyra watched, impressed by the human's ability to direct a battle in real time. Her guards moved with precision, following instructions that were both unconventional and brilliant. The rival faction's forces, trained for standard engagements, faltered under the unpredictable tactics. Kale's eyes were wide, but he remained calm. "This is like a game," he whispered, pointing out small pathways the humans could use. "Over here, they will not see you." Lara nodded. "Exactly, Kale. Thank you." She moved swiftly through the narrow corridors he indicated, flanking the enemy from a direction they had not anticipated. Small explosions and loud distractions created a sense of chaos, which the human mind had deliberately engineered. Humans could improvise in ways the enemy never expected. The rival faction regrouped, confused and frustrated. Their commanders had underestimated the humans' ingenuity, assuming they would act in predictable ways. Every misstep they made allowed Alara and Lyra to tighten their control over the city's defense. Hours passed in tense action. The enemy struck and withdrew, trying different strategies, but Alara's human ingenuity anticipated their moves. She coordinated with Lyra, who used her knowledge of the city's secret passages to stay one step ahead. Kale guided them through hidden alleys, showing paths only a child could know. Together, they were an unstoppable team, blending human creativity with Varelian familiarity. By evening, the rival faction was disoriented and frustrated. Their attempts to capture Lyra or Kale had failed, and their forces were scattered. Alara knew this was the turning point. They had bought themselves time, established control, and proven that humans could be more than just emotional observers. They were capable strategists. Lyra turned to Alara, her expression a mix of relief and respect. "I underestimated humans," she said quietly. "Your strategies, they are brilliant. You are not merely clever or fearless." Alara shrugged modestly. "Fearless isn't the word. Determined is better. Humans fight for what matters, no matter the odds. That is why we survive." Kale, exhausted but proud, hugged her leg. "You are my hero, human. You've saved us today." Lyra bent down, smiling at the small alien. "We saved each other. And tomorrow, we keep going. They will not stop coming, but neither will we." That night, as the city settled into an uneasy calm, Alara and Lyra reviewed the day's events. Every move had been calculated, every risk managed, but the rival faction had proven cunning. Tomorrow, they would need even greater ingenuity. Lyra placed her hand on Ilara's shoulder. "You are more than a diplomat. You are a protector. Kale will never forget this day, and neither will I." Ilara felt a surge of pride. Humans had been underestimated across the galaxy, often dismissed as impulsive or weak. But here on this distant world, she had proven that courage, strategy, and loyalty could rival any alien power. Kale sat nearby, wide-eyed and eager to learn. "Can we do it again tomorrow?" he asked. Ilara smiled gently. "Yes, Kale, we can. And we will. Humans never give up, and neither should you." The child nodded solemnly, as if internalizing a lesson that would stay with him for a lifetime. For him and for his mother, humans had become a symbol of hope, ingenuity, and courage, the very traits that would allow them to survive against impossible odds. As she looked out over the city from the sanctuary, Alara realized that this was what HFY truly meant. Humanity was underestimated, overlooked, and often dismissed. But when the moment came, humans could shine, not with overwhelming power, but with cleverness, adaptability, and the unyielding drive to protect those they cared about. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The rival faction would adapt, escalate, and attempt new strategies. But Alara was ready. Humans had faced impossible odds before, and humans had survived. With Kale's guidance, Lyra's knowledge, and her own ingenuity, she was confident they could outsmart any enemy. And in the quiet moments before dawn, Alara made another promise to herself as much as to them.
No matter what came,
She would protect Lyra and Kale. She would fight, think, and survive, because that was what humans did. Outside. The city was silent again, but Alara knew this was only temporary. The enemy had not vanished. They had only been delayed. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. And when it did, humans would show the galaxy exactly why they could never be underestimated. The first rays of light spilled over the Varelian city, but the calm of morning was deceptive. Alara Dane knew better than anyone that the rival faction would not wait long. Their earlier failures had only stoked their determination, and she could feel it in the tension that rippled through the streets. The enemy would strike again, and this time it would be all out. Lyra stood beside her in the sanctuary, her expression steady but tense. Kale clung to her side, small hands gripping her robe. "Mom, do you think we can really stop them?" he asked quietly, his eyes reflecting both fear and hope. Lyra knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently. "Yes, Kale, we can, but we must be smart, brave, and united. And we are lucky we have Alara on our side." Alara studied the city map displayed on the holographic console. The rival factions' forces were moving now, larger than before, with faster ships and more coordinated troops. Their strategy was clear: overwhelm the city with multiple attacks, force Lyra out into the open, and capture or eliminate her and Kale. "They're coming in waves," Lara said, tracing the movement lines. "First, a diversion from the east, then the main strike from the south. If we time it right, we can control where they fight." Lyra nodded. "We have the sanctuary and the secret corridors. We can guide them, use the city itself to our advantage. Act quickly." Kale looked up at Alara, his small face serious. "Will humans fight? Will you fight?" Alara crouched to meet his gaze. "Yes, Kale. Humans fight for what they care about. And I care about you and your mother. We will stop them together." The first wave hit just as the sun crested the horizon. Alara had prepared the decoys carefully. Holographic images of Lyra and Kale appeared in the open streets, accompanied by sounds and small disturbances to draw the enemy in. Explosions of smoke and flashing lights made the city seem more chaotic than it was. The rival faction took the bait. Their forces swarmed toward the decoys, believing they had located their targets. But Alara had anticipated this. Hidden drones, traps, and strategically placed guards created a controlled battlefield. The attackers found themselves confused, harried, and outmatched not by raw power, but by strategy and ingenuity. Lyra led a small group of loyal Varelian guards along secret corridors, keeping Kale close. The child's knowledge of the city was invaluable. He pointed out passages and blind spots that no outsider could know. Alara coordinated from a vantage point, guiding movements with precision. Every decision, every delay, every distraction was calculated to protect Lyra and Kale, while weakening the enemy. As the battle unfolded, Alara realized something she had known instinctively. Humans were underestimated not because of weakness, but because their thinking was unpredictable. Alien factions expected direct confrontation, rigid plans, and linear strategies. Humans, however, adapted, improvised, and saw opportunities where others saw chaos. In one narrow alley, a group of the rival faction's troops became trapped between a false wall and hidden defenses. Alara had lured them there with carefully timed distractions. Smoke filled the alley. Sensors triggered alarms, and automated barriers confined them. By the time they realized the trap, it was too late. Lyra glanced at Alara, a mixture of awe and gratitude on her face. "This is incredible. You are changing the battlefield without even touching them directly." Alara smiled briefly. "Humans fight with brains as much as strength. And today, brains will keep us alive." Meanwhile, Kale led a group of civilians safely through underground passages, showing them routes that even some of Lyra's guards did not know. "This way," he whispered quickly. "They won't see us here." The rival faction's main strike arrived in the south, larger than anyone expected. Ships hovered above the city, troops descending with the intent to overwhelm. Alara anticipated this as well. She had coordinated the city's defenses to channel them into narrow streets where the drones, traps, and defensive barriers could slow them down. Fires erupted along decoy streets. Alarms blared, and holographic projections flickered, making the enemy question what was real and what was illusion. Panic spread among their ranks. They had expected an easy victory, but humans and Varelians had turned the city into a maze of confusion. Lyra stayed calm, her voice steady as she directed her loyalists. "Remember your training. Protect the civilians. Keep moving and stay hidden." Alara moved through the city herself, coordinating the response. She placed drones strategically, set traps to slow the enemy, and used signals to communicate with Lyra and Kale. Every action was timed to perfection, designed to maximize confusion for the enemy while minimizing risk to the innocent. Hours passed in tense coordination. The enemy struck repeatedly, but each wave was met with unexpected obstacles. Clever misdirection and precise countermeasures. Human creativity proved to be the deciding factor. Where raw power failed, strategy triumphed. Kale watched from a safe corridor, awe in his eyes. "They can't beat humans," he whispered. "They don't know what we can do." Lara crouched beside him briefly. "Exactly, Kale. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a sword or a ship, it's thinking differently, acting smart and never giving up." Lyra joined them, her expression softening as she looked at Alara. "I can see why humans are respected in your councils. Your ingenuity is extraordinary. You have given us hope we thought was gone." The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city. The enemy's forces had been reduced, disoriented, and trapped. The last wave attempted a desperate push toward the sanctuary, but Alara had anticipated it. She guided Lyra and her loyalists to hidden exits, ensuring they could escape any final attack in the climactic moments. Ilara used a combination of false signals, rapid movements, and small, controlled explosions to divide the enemy's attention. One group was trapped in a side street, another misled to a decoy location, and the main strike was funneled into a corridor where automated defenses immobilized them. The rival faction's commanders finally realized their failure. They had underestimated the humans, misjudged the city's defenders, and been outsmarted at every turn. Retreat was their only option. When the last of the attackers fled, silence descended over the city. Fires burned in controlled areas, alarms slowly quieted, and the civilians emerged from their hiding places. The city had survived. Lyra and Kale were safe, and the rival faction had been humiliated. Lyra turned to Alara, eyes shining with gratitude. "You have saved us, human. Not just our lives, but our future. You have proven that humans are not to be underestimated." Alara shook her head. "I didn't do it alone. Kale's knowledge, your people's courage, and human creativity, it all worked together. That's how we win." Kale ran to Alara, throwing his small arms around her waist. "You really are a hero. You saved my mom and me." Ilara knelt and hugged him back. "We saved each other, Kale, and we'll keep doing that. No matter what comes next, we'll face it together." Lyra placed a hand on Alara's shoulder, a gesture of respect and alliance. "The Council will remember today. Humans have earned their place in our eyes. You have not only protected us, you have shown strength, courage, and brilliance. I will speak of this day for generations." Ilara smiled, feeling a sense of pride and exhaustion. Humans had been underestimated across the galaxy, dismissed as unpredictable and emotional. But today, human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability had turned the tide against a powerful enemy. They had survived not by brute force, but by thinking differently, acting boldly, and fighting for what mattered. As night fell, the city slowly returned to normal. Lyra and Kale were safe in the sanctuary, the civilians were unharmed, and the rival faction had been forced to retreat. The battle was over, but the war was not. Alara gazed out at the darkened city. The enemy would regroup, they would strike again, and new challenges would come. But humans had proven that even when underestimated, they could turn the impossible into the possible. Kale peeked out from behind his mother. "Do you think they will come back?" Ilara smiled at him. "Yes, probably, but we will be ready. Humans never give up, and neither should you." Lyra placed her hand on Alara's shoulder once more. "You have changed everything, human. Not just for us, but for how the galaxy sees your kind. You are more than a diplomat. You are a symbol of what humans can do when they fight for what they love." Ilara felt the weight of those words, but also a surge of determination. The battle had been won, but the fight for the future was just beginning. With Kale's guidance, Lyra's courage, and human ingenuity, they could face whatever came next. And in that quiet moment, as the stars began to shimmer over the city, Alara knew something deep and undeniable. Humans had not only survived, they had shown the galaxy that courage, intelligence, and heart could overcome even the most formidable enemies. The night was calm, but the promise of future battles hung in the air. Tomorrow would bring new tests, and the rival faction would surely return. But the humans, Lyra and Kale, were ready. Together, they were unstoppable. The morning sky over the Varelian city was streaked with gold and pink. But Alara Dane knew the calm would not last. The rival faction would not forgive their failure. They had been humiliated yesterday, their carefully laid plans crushed by human ingenuity, Aurelian loyalty, and a child's knowledge of the city. Today, they would come back stronger, smarter, and more ruthless. Lyra stood in the sanctuary, her gaze steady, though the tension was visible in the slight tightening of her jaw. Kale clung to her side, wide-eyed, but surprisingly composed. "Mom, will we be okay?" he asked, his small voice barely above a whisper. Lyra knelt, brushing his hair back. "We will. Alara and the humans have shown us that even the impossible can be overcome. But we must be smart, brave, and united." Lara joined them, checking the sanctuary systems one last time. "The enemy has learned from yesterday. They will try something bigger, faster, and more coordinated. But humans thrive on challenges. We will adapt and fight back in ways they cannot predict." Kale's eyes sparkled with determination. "Then let's do it. Let's show them they can't win." The city grew tense as the first signs of the enemy appeared. Ships descended from orbit, larger and more numerous than the previous day. Ground troops moved swiftly through hidden paths coordinated with precision. It was clear that this would be a decisive battle. Alara quickly outlined the plan. The sanctuary would remain a safe base, with traps, decoys, and defensive systems ready. Lyra's loyalists would guide civilians to safety, while Kale would continue to provide knowledge of secret routes. Human strategy would control the battlefield, using unpredictability to their advantage. The first wave arrived in the city's eastern district. Holographic decoys flickered to life, creating the illusion that Lyra and Kale were moving openly. Smoke, lights, and sound disturbances added to the confusion. The enemy struck, but their movements were slower. Cautious, they did not yet understand the full scope of the human strategy. Elar moved quickly, guiding Varelian defenders through hidden corridors. Drones and automated defenses were deployed with precision. Small explosions blocked streets, forcing enemy troops into paths designed for containment. Every move was calculated, exploiting the rival faction's assumptions that humans would act predictably. Lyra, calm and commanding, led a group of civilians and guards to safety. "Stay together. Follow Kale," she shouted, her voice steady, even as chaos erupted around them. Kale ran ahead, showing hidden passageways, his small hands guiding those who would otherwise be trapped. "Here, this way." "Hurry," the rival faction regrouped, frustrated by the unexpected resistance. They had expected an easy victory, but humans had turned the city into a controlled maze of confusion. Alara anticipated their attempts to adapt. Using her knowledge of their previous tactics, she created new traps and diversions on the fly. By mid-morning, the enemy's main strike reached the southern district. Massive ships hovered above, ready to deploy elite troops. Alara had prepared for this, using decoys and false signals to mislead them. The enemy troops were drawn into narrow streets, where barriers and drones immobilized them. They were trapped, unable to reach Lyra or Kale. Lyra glanced at Alara, eyes full of admiration. "You have turned our city into a fortress without walls. Humans truly think differently." Lara nodded. "Thinking differently is our strength. We survive because we adapt, improvise, and never give up." Kale watched from the side, awe on his face. "They don't know what humans can do," he whispered. Hours passed in a tense battle of wits and strategy. Each wave of enemy troops was met with clever countermeasures. Fires erupted in controlled areas, alarms blared, and decoys kept the enemy off balance. Humans and Varelians worked together seamlessly, combining intellect, knowledge of the city, and courage to outsmart a superior force. By afternoon, the enemy's forces were breaking. Confusion spread among their ranks, coordination faltered, and panic began to take hold. Alara noticed the moment was coming to strike decisively. "Now," she said, "focus on the corridors leading to the decoy zones. We trap them completely and force a retreat." Lyra directed her loyalists with calm authority, moving troops and civilians to safety. Kale led groups of defenders through secret passages to cut off the enemy's escape. Every detail had been planned. but the execution relied on adaptability, something humans excelled at. The final confrontation occurred in the Central District. The rival faction's leaders had brought their elite forces, hoping to recover honor through direct combat. They did not expect Alara Dane to be waiting. Humans were underestimated at every step, and that underestimation was their undoing. Ilara coordinated the attack, combining Varelian strength, Kale's knowledge, and human tactics. Drones, barriers, and carefully timed maneuvers trapped the enemy, leaving their leaders no choice but to surrender or flee. Confused, exhausted, and demoralized, they chose retreat. Disappearing into the distance, the city erupted in quiet relief. Civilians emerged from hidden places, cheering and hugging one another. Lyra and Kale were safe. The enemy had been forced to retreat, humiliated and broken by a combination of courage, strategy, and ingenuity. Lyra turned to Alara, her eyes shining. "You have saved not only us, but the future of our people. Humans are stronger than I imagined. You have shown bravery, wisdom, and loyalty beyond measure." Alara shook her head, smiling softly. "I didn't do it alone. Kale's guidance, your people's courage, and human strategy worked together. That is how we win." Kale ran to her, throwing his small arms around her waist. "You really did it. You saved my mom and me." Ilara knelt and hugged him back. "We saved each other, Kale, and we will continue to. No matter what comes, we will face it together." As evening fell, the city began to recover. Fires were controlled, streets cleared, and the remaining enemy forces fled. The rival faction had learned a harsh lesson. Humans were not weak, emotional, or predictable. They were clever, brave, capable of turning impossible situations into victories. Lyra placed her hand on Alara's shoulder. "You have changed how the galaxy will see humans, not as weak observers, but as allies to be respected and feared. Today, humans earned a place in our history." Alara felt pride and relief, but also a sense of responsibility. Humans had survived not by brute force, but by courage, intelligence, and determination. She knew the rival faction might return someday, but today, humans had proven their worth. Kale looked up at the stars, holding Lyra's hand and brushing against Elara's. "Do you think they will come back?" he asked. Alara smiled at him. "They might, but we are ready. Humans never give up, and neither should you." Lyra nodded. "The city is safe for now. The council will hear of your deeds. Alara, you have shown that courage, loyalty, and clever thinking can overcome even the greatest threats." Alara gazed out over the city, feeling the weight of everything they had accomplished. Humans had been underestimated for centuries, dismissed as impulsive or emotional. But here, on this distant world, human courage and ingenuity had saved lives, protected a family, and turned the tide against a formidable enemy. Kale tugged at her sleeve. "Will you stay with us?" he asked. "Please." Alara knelt beside him, smiling. "I will. We will protect each other, Kale. That is what makes a family, no matter species, no matter distance, no matter odds." Lyra placed her hand on Ilara's shoulder, her eyes softening. "Then we are family. Not by law, not by ceremony, but by choice, trust, and courage. Today, humans and Varelians are united in more ways than one." The city settled into quiet, the battle over, but the lessons of the day would last forever. Humans had proven themselves in the face of overwhelming odds. They had shown that courage, intelligence, and the will to protect those you love were weapons more powerful than fleets or armies. Ilara looked at Kale and Lyra, and then at the horizon. The rival faction might return, the galaxy might challenge them in new ways. But humans had shown the universe what they were capable of, and for Kale, who had once begged a human to marry his mother, a new world had opened. One where humans could be allies, protectors, and symbols of hope. He realized that bravery, clever thinking, and loyalty were not limited by species. Ilara placed a hand on his small shoulder. "The galaxy is big, Kale, but together, there is nothing we cannot face." Kale smiled, hope shining in his eyes. "Then let's face it, together." The stars twinkled above, silent witnesses to the victory of courage, strategy, and the human spirit. Today, humans had won not through power alone, but through heart, intellect, and determination. The galaxy would remember, and somewhere deep inside, Alara knew this was only the beginning. Humans had arrived and they would never be underestimated again.